control of the public, there's a very obvious moment to inspect carefully. Now that's just 20 years ago, at the time of the fall of the Berlin Wall and what followed later. Now this celebration of the 20th anniversary this November, it's already begun with ample coverage, and it's surely going to increase as the date approaches. But the very revealing policy implications of what followed have been ignored, as in the past, and probably this coming November, except on Democracy Now! What happened after the Berlin Wall fell? Well, the Bush 1 administration reacted immediately. It issued a new national security strategy and a budget proposal which laid out what our new course will be after the collapse of what Kennedy called the monolithic and ruthless conspiracy to conquer the world, Reagan's evil empire. It was gone. And now that it was gone, the whole framework of propaganda collapsed. So what was the response of the planners in the Bush administration? Very straightforward. In brief, everything will go on exactly as before, but with new pretexts. So we still need the same huge military system, but for a new reason. Literally, because of the technological sophistication of third world powers. Nobody laughed. We have to maintain what they call the defense industrial base. It's a standard euphemism for high-tech industry. The system whereby the public pays the costs and takes the risks, and high-tech industry gets the profits. We also have to maintain intervention forces directed mostly at the Middle East. And then comes this interesting phrase, directed at the Middle East, where the threats to our interests that required military intervention could not be laid at the Kremlin's door. In other words, sorry folks, we've been lying to you for 50 years, but now the clouds have lifted so you could see if you choose to, and few chose to. Actually, the fate of NATO is very instructive and highly pertinent right now. Prior to Gorbachev, NATO's announced purpose was to deter a Russian invasion of Europe. It was often a little hard to take seriously. For example, in 1945, in May 1945, Winston Churchill ordered war plans to be drawn up for what they call Operation Unthinkable. It was aimed at, quote, the elimination of Russia. The plans, which were declassified 10 years ago, quoted, called for a surprise attack by hundreds of thousands of British and American troops, joined by 100,000 rearmed German soldiers, while the RAF, British Air Force, would attack Soviet cities from bases in Northern Europe. And pretty soon nuclear weapons were added to the mix. All of this was declassified 10 years ago. Well, the official stand also wasn't very easy to take about 10 years later when Khrushchev took over in Russia. And he very soon proposed a very sharp mutual reduction in offensive military weaponry. He understood very well that the much weaker Soviet economy couldn't possibly sustain an arms race with the United States and still hope to develop. Well, when the U.S. dismissed the offer, as it did, he carried out the reduction unilaterally. And Kennedy did react to that. He reacted with a very sharp increase in military spending, which the Russian military later tried to match. That's tanking the economy, as Khrushchev had anticipated. Actually, that was the crucial moment in the Soviet collapse. The economy stagnated since then. Well, whatever one thinks of the defensive pretext for NATO, at least had some credibility. But what happens when the Soviet Union is gone and the pretext disappears? Well, it got more extreme. Gorbachev made an astonishing concession. He permitted a unified Germany to join a hostile military alliance alliance run by the global superpower. That is astonishing in the light of history. Germany alone had practically destroyed Russia twice in the century. Now there was a quid pro quo. This is Bush #1 and James Baker. It had been thought up until a couple of months ago that Bush and Baker promised not to expand NATO to the Eastern European former Soviet satellites. But there was the first careful study of the original documents just came out by Mark Kramer, a Cold War historian. He believes that he's refuting charges of U.S. duplicity. But in fact, what he shows is that it's much more cynical than what had been assumed. It turns out that Bush and Baker promised Gorbachev that NATO wouldn't even fully extend to East Germany. Quote them, they told Gorbachev no NATO forces would ever be deployed on the territory of the former German GDR, East Germany. NATO's jurisdiction or forces would not move eastward. They also assured Gorbachev that NATO would be transforming itself into a more political organization. Well, there's no need to comment on that promise, but what follows tells us a lot more about the Cold War and its aftermath. Right after that, Clinton came into office. And one of the first things he did was to begin the expansion of NATO to the east, radical violation of the commitment. Process accelerated with Bush's general aggressive militarism. Russia, these are severe security threat to Russia. It naturally reacted by developing more offensive military capacity. All of this is a serious threat to human survival. Obama's national security advisor, James Jones, he has a still more expansive conception. He calls for expanding NATO further to the east and the south, becoming in effect a US-run global intervention force, as it is today in Afghanistan. The Secretary General of NATO, Dutch officer de Sheffer, he informed the NATO meeting that NATO troops have to guard pipelines that transport oil and gas that's directed for the West. And more generally, NATO has to protect sea routes used by tankers and other crucial infrastructure of the global energy system. All of that just opens up a new phase of Western imperial domination. The polite term for it is bringing stability and peace. That's what's happening now. In AFPAC, Afghanistan, Pakistan, as the region's now called, Obama is building enormous new embassies and other facilities on the model of the city within a city in Baghdad. These are like no embassies anywhere in the world. And they are signs of an intention to be there for a long time. Right now in Iraq, something interesting is happening. Obama's pressing the Iraqi government not to permit the referendum that's required by the Status of Forces Agreement. That's an agreement that was forced down the throats of the Bush administration, which had to formally renounce its primary war aims in the face of massive Iraqi resistance. Washington's current objection to the referendum was explained 2 days ago by New York Times correspondent Alyssa Rubin. Obama fears that the Iraqi population might reject the provision that delays U.S. troop withdrawal to 2012. They might insist on immediate departure of U.S. forces. Iraqi analyst in London